Okay guys, I want to do another lasso tool, and it's going to be the third one. So if you've just watched the polygonal lasso tool, we're going to move on to the magnetic lasso tool. And this is kind of a combination between the polygonal lasso tool and the regular lasso tool, except this one has some additional options that help us select what we're trying to. So as always, we have our ability to do our preset options for any tool. And I just made a boo-boo here by selecting something. We also have our main options with any of our selection tools, so our new selection, our additional selection, our subtract select, and our intersect selection. So I'm not going to cover these. Feel free to watch some of the marquee tools or the first two lasso tools in order to get that information. The same with feather and anti-aliasing. I have also covered those extensively in the lasso tool and the rectangular marquee tool. However, what's different about this tool are the width, contrast, and frequency. And let me just show you. I'm going to leave it at 10 pixels, 10% contrast, and the 57 frequency. And I'm going to zoom in on this image by going Command plus, and I'm going to show you how to use the magnetic lasso tool. So if I click just once and let go, I get my starting point, and you can see how it showed up there. And now all I'm going to do is drag my image, or my cursor down along the image, and do you see what's happening? It's making its own points along the edge of her arm. And what it's doing is it's calculating every single step of the way, saying, hey, you know what? I know that, oh, see, I tried to move my mouse on my trackpad at the same time. But you get the idea. It's moving along her arm saying, hey, I know this yellow color is different than sort of this pale and fleshy color tone. And so I know that I want to be able to draw along that line, and that's what these numbers allow you to decide, is how clear of a distinction you want to make between two types of colors, contrast, and the width. So let me try this again. I'm going to select here, and I'm going to continue to draw, and you can kind of break pattern by clicking again, going across. I'm going to click here to kind of break the pattern. Go up here and keep going all the way. I'm going to drag it around the edge here, and it's following nicely. And I'm going to click at my closing point. You'll notice that little circle on the edge of my tool means that I'm on the starting point. I'm going to click, and there, it's made a perfect selection of her arm. So if I did Command C, Command V, and used my move tool, I could drag this nice selection of her arm. So that was using the magnetic lasso tool at this set, and I just kind of want to show you what happens if I jack this up to like 250, or sorry, I meant to do 25, not 250. Can't go more than 100. So let's go and do our frequency at 25. Still moving pretty nicely, but I can tell that my line is maybe guessing a little bit more than I want it to. And I don't like that. If I didn't have such a defined line here, I might get a little scared. So if I do a Command C and Command V, sorry, it's going to want to copy merged. And then I Command V and bring this over. Pretty good. They're about the same, but this one is actually much better. You can see I got a little bit of her shirt there, and I didn't get that here. So by lowering my frequency, it gave me more of what I didn't want. So let's try going all the way up to 100 and seeing what it does. Okay, do you see how many points it's making? it's making a lot more points because it's saying, okay, there is a clear definition here, and I know that that's where the user wants this to be defined. So if I click here, I come across, and then I start to go up, I'm getting a lot more points, much more defined, and we'll close it off there. And Command, we'll do another copy merged, and we'll see the third option. So this one's actually, look at how clear this line is here. Much more defined here than it is here. But that's not always a good thing. You'll see that this kind of has a nice slope here, where this one is much more jagged. So it's good to recognize that a low frequency has a lot more play in what the computer sees as one color versus another. If you keep it right in the middle, you're almost always going to get a pretty much steady line all the way around. And if you crank it up really high, Photoshop is going to say, nope, I'm only taking this color. I will not take any yellow whatsoever. I must stick to the arm. So know that frequency can change how clear and how soft an image can be selected. So let's go ahead and get rid of all these. Let me go to my layers and delete these last couple. Alright. No. Okay. So, if we go back to the magnetic lasso tool, and let's try playing with the width. Let's jack this up to 90 and see what this does. So, I made the mistake of leaving this on 100. I'm going to put this back at 50 for the frequency, and we're going to start selecting again. And you'll see it's also again a very relaxed line. And what happens if I stray? Okay, it doesn't really know what I want it to do because my width and my contrast don't really match. So it knew the arm, but it didn't know any of this because this yellow is kind of out there. Let's say that I cranked up my contrast to 90%. Let's see what happens there. Oh, it's also being a very lax line. And you see what happens when I come out here and get even less points because it cannot recognize such a high contrast. I said that I want you to recognize really high contrast rather than really low contrast. So if I were to select this guy's or this woman's arm, you can tell that it's picking up on those blue highlights and the skin highlights compared to the white fairly easily. See how clear of a line that is? But it can't tell when you're in a solid color because there's no contrast. So just recognize that the width and your contrast go hand in hand, and your frequency will tell you how defined the image is going to be that you're selecting. So I'm just going to go ahead and select her arm again, and then we're going to quickly talk about refined edge. So here we go. So you see how my contrast was high and my width was high? So it selected more than I wanted it to because my width was so high. My contrast was at such a high percentage, but my frequency was in the right range, just not when I've had these so intense. So if I select this refine edge, this is just another way to play around with your selections. So just like the other lasso tools, I have my selection here, and I can play with my radius, and I can even turn on smart radius so it knows what I want selected. Then I have my smoothing options, which smooth my edges. I can feather things. If I really cranked it up, you'll be able to see, especially if I turn down my smoothing and my radius. And then also my contrast, which opposes the feathering and kind of tightens it back in or loosens it up. And then of course my shift edge, which means I can view more of my selection or less of my selection. And that's pretty much it for the magnetic lasso tool. Just recognize that this is a more automated lasso tool. And these are the three numbers that you want to play along with: the width, the contrast, and the frequency. Frequency, in my opinion, is the most important. If I were new to Photoshop, or I was just trying to do simple selections with the magnetic lasso tool, I would probably leave the contrast at 10 and the width at 10 pixels. And then I would play with my frequency. If I wanted something really tight, I would try to raise my frequency number, but if I was being more casual with my selection, I might loosen it to maybe 30 or 25. Also, remember, this button is for Wacom tablets or any kind of tablet, and it will base your selection on the pressure sensitivity of the stylus that you're using. And that's pretty much it for the magnetic lasso tool.